Welcome, and howsoever are you? If you have followed my dear videos, you may have found out that I hail from that diamond of chivalry, gentlemen, and proper ladies, the American South. I come from that greatest of southern states, Georgia, home of Atlanta, the Atlanta International Airport, Buckhead, and a bunch of other crap that no one cares about. Yes, indeed, the one thing we have in excess of fried chicken here in our slice of the world is a fine outpouring of literature. Yes, very fine indeed. It is somewhat of an irony that most of our population cannot read, though I assure you that our novels, which are children of our brains, will astound and entertain you far beyond your wildest dreams. I often find my own dreams transplanted from the fruitful fields of my mind to the very paper in which my hands are holding. Such is the power of Southern literature, often detailing the intricate and interesting lives of the region's inhabitants. Oh yes, and there is a bit of a racial persuasion in there too, and we will get to that in due course. However, just because a novel is about the South does not make it a Southern novel. For instance, I will not be entertaining the ideas set forth in Mrs. Stowe's work, Uncle Tom's Cabin, because that is Yankee propaganda and has no business on my show. Well, unless further ado is necessary, let me introduce Nick's Southern Heritage series. Okay, alright, I'll drop the phony accent and get to it. Hey, if my real voice is a Southern accent, let me know. I've heard yay and nay on that. Anyway, I wanted to start no closer than my own hometown. I was born, raised, and still live in Augusta, Georgia, home of James Brown, and the Masters, and the Augusta National, and the Augusta Green Jackets, and a bunch of rednecks who like golf. And there's a bunch of black people, too. Augusta is actually the second biggest city in Augusta, second only to Atlanta, which hogs everything, though we're coming up fast these days. One of our most famous residents, aside from me, of course, has been Erskine Caldwell, a guy who wrote over 25 novels and 150 short stories, but is only really known for two. The two that take place here, in the heart of Georgia. Tobacco Road and God's Little Acre are the books that made him famous, mostly because they were considered so obscene that they were banned up in New York and Boston. Oh yeah, when something's banned in Boston, you know that it's hot shit. That sounds about like the South. Tobacco Road is a novel of the Great Depression, and it follows a family of sharecroppers. You know, farmers who split the land amongst themselves, like communists, as they struggle to survive in the moneyless lands of Augusta. They live on Tobacco Road, the main artery from Georgia into South Carolina. It still exists today. I've been on it. Jeter Lester has lived on their land all his life and refuses to go into the city and work in a factory to make a living. Instead, they want to get busy dying. Half of the novel is Jeter and his wife Ada worrying about how their funerals are going to go, rather than try and actually succeed at something. They even have to steal turnips from their son-in-law, who's married to their 13-year-old daughter. I mean, they could have just asked, but they instead opted for her to prance around naked in order to distract him. It was a good thing, though, because he was having trouble getting her into bed and had yet to consummate their vows. He had wanted Jeter's help in tying her up. Now, 13 may sound young to our modern readers, but remember, this was back in the 30s. It was a different time, and it was still illegal. You see, he would have married Jeter's rather lovely 18-year-old daughter, but she had a horrendous cleft in her lip, and thus cannot be loved by any man. And all of Jeter's other daughters had run away. However, he did have a son named Dude, and he was ripe for the marrying age. No, he weren't into no weird stuff with guys or anything. He caught the eye of a middle-aged preacher lady. Now, this lady wasn't too perfect. She liked a bone in her nose, and thus her nostrils flared up her face and looked like two shotgun holes staring you down. Nevertheless, they found true love with one another in the form of the lady whoring herself out enough to buy a fancy new car. Oh boy, did Dude love driving that car. He loved it so much he crashed right into a stump with it on the first day. But that didn't deter him, no. He also got in a wreck and killed the driver of the other car. It was okay, though. He was a black guy. As the plot progresses, the car becomes more and more wrecked, but Dude just can't resist driving it. He eventually gets into a fight with his wife after it comes that she's really 39. When she said she was 31, and races away from the scene in a fit of rage. However, he accidentally smashes into his grandmother, knocking her to the ground. They bury her out in the field after ascertaining, well, she ain't stiff yet. But you gotta give it to old Jeter. He always wanted to work that farm as hard as he could. He never has any money to buy seeds with, but by the end he finally decides he can wrangle it up. The novel ends with him setting fire to the broom sedge which litters his land, and the fire consuming his house and burning his wife and he in their sleep. But wait, there's more! His next novel, God's Little Acre, is again about a poor farmer in Georgia. There seems to be a pattern here. Anyway, this one concerns the Waldens, led by Father Tai, or maybe it's TT. Tai's goal in life isn't to farm, but to find some gold. He has the titular God's Little Acre, which is an acre of land that, if you can grow anything on it, he will donate to the church. However, he doesn't like the idea of the church getting a hold of any gold he digs up, so he keeps shifting it around the acres he wants to dig for gold. Just like that, he can pick it up and move it. It actually starts with this asshole named Pluto Swint, a fat guy who wants to be elected mayor and desires Tai's daughter, Darling Jill. He's not that important to the story. Darling Jill likes to have sex with her sister, Rosamond's husband, Will, who worked at a textile factory but is unemployed because they didn't have enough electricity to power the mill. He also wants to have sex with his brother-in-law, Buck's wife, Griselda, who is the most beautiful woman in all the land. You got all that? No? Then don't worry. Tai also has another son, Jim Leslie, who lives in town and has a high-paying job and tries to disown his family, but they come begging to him for money. He reluctantly gives in, only on the condition that he can have sex with Griselda, his brother Buck's beautiful wife. When she refuses, he tries to rape her, but she runs away. Okay, that's most of the characters, but here's the plot. Tai hears a rumor that if he goes and gets an albino guy, the albino can sniff out the gold on his land for him. Naturally, he goes and kidnaps the poor boy and lets him sniff out the gold during the day while he watches him have sex with his daughter at night. Oh yeah, and it's implied that he hooks up with one of the black farmhands. All them blacks want is just to be white. The plot really gets going when Will, the husband of Rosamond, if you remember, finally gets drunk and has his way with Griselda, Buck's beautiful wife, while the others listen intently. It's not stated how consensual this is. Finally, suffused with the sexual energies, he marches on the depowered mill and tries to forcibly turn on the power. He is promptly shot and forgotten about. The next day, the wealthy son, Jim Leslie, comes up to the house demanding Buck's wife, Griselda, for the money he gave them. A fight breaks out and Buck kills his own brother. The novel ends with Tai digging for gold in the hole, shifting God's Little Acre so that Buck will always be on it. Buck goes wandering off with the shotgun that he killed his brother with. Okay, so from a southern perspective, they suck. I guess they attracted attention for their sheer lewdness, which was pretty explicit at the time. I mean, it never says something like, he thrusts his cock into her pussy or something, but the mere suggestion of these ridiculous sexual activities was more than enough to get people's goat. Part of this, I think, is that it's in polite society. Yes, things that were very explicit existed back then, but sophisticated people didn't read them, in much the same way that flat-out pornography isn't really discussed today. It was all part of the dirty, pulpy trash that polluted the poor mindset. Also, it allowed the Yankees to get a view into the lives of southern white trash. There was trash up in the north, but this allowed the northerners to have someone to look down on, or at least I think so, I don't know. It provided them a view into an alien world, much like the Martians of H.G. Wells. But what do I mean by, it sucks? I don't like the stories. The plot is convoluted and hard to follow. Tobacco Road doesn't even have a central plot, just a collection of incidents that are used to illustrate the characters. And the characters suck. Yeah, they're supposed to be horrible, unlikable assholes who just do everything in their power to make you hate them. But even then, they don't shock me that much. I actually know people like that. It's not that uncommon, actually. I mean, yeah, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's not exactly enlightening. Naturally, when these were first published, while they were vilified in the North, Erskine Caldwell was condemned in the South. Yeah, some people liked him, but most accused him of degenerating the moral fiber of his home community. This is pretty common, as it shows most people don't want to hear the truth about themselves. He would return to the South and make several traveling guides about his native region. The two novels were huge successes, being massive bestsellers that both got turned into movies. Tobacco Road was directed by John Ford, of all people, but was a spineless Hollywood film version of the original novel. As much as I didn't like the book, at least it had balls. It was also adapted as a Broadway play and became one of their longest-running shows. Like I said, the Yanks got a kick out of us rednecks. It was less spineless, but it wasn't as hardcore as the novel. God's Little Acre was again adapted into a film, again spineless and uninteresting. It was a little sexy, and people under the age of 18 were banned from getting to see it. Not that there were tits or anything, but it was kind of a proto-R rating. It was noted for the scene in which Will tries to turn the power back on and gets shot, which looked suspiciously like a communist uprising. This was during McCarthyism, and the screenwriter had been blacklisted from Hollywood. One of the problems with the films, especially the first one, is that they play a lot of the story off for laughs. Caldwell insisted his work wasn't comical, and if someone suggested it was, he would get mad and leave the room. He didn't want to hear it. I think that's the big problem with his stories, how humorless they are. I laughed at them because they're absurd, but they're played completely straight. You're supposed to realize that these people exist. They're not just clowns in some faraway fantasy land. He wanted to draw attention to the plight and the suffering of the trash here in Georgia, and he certainly did. People know them now. People are familiar with the idea of human garbage inhabiting not only their country, not only their states, but themselves as well. That's what's not funny about it, that these things are lurking inside of us, and that we can slip into their skins if we're not too careful. Well, this is a good start. Join me next time, and we'll be heading into the rivers of Missouri.
Johnny said, devil, just come on back if you ever want to try again. I done told you once, you son of a bitch, I'm the best there's ever been. He